And good evening, and welcome once again to the happenings in Medfield. This is a special program, one in which I know I had been asked a number of times relative to a gentleman, a poet, well-known, and a merchant seaman. His name really needs no introduction, but I'm awfully happy that he's just sitting here at the anchor desk with me. His name, Pat Conneely. Pat?
Hi, Jack.
Nice to have you.
Thank you.
What we are doing in this program is a book in which Pat has put together a number of poems that he had written that are published. Soon you will find these books available for purchase. But at this particular moment, just a conversation about the poet, the books, and what Pat has done over the years. So let's get started. Pat, the introduction to the United States Maritime Academy in Bourne was your beginning. And how did that start?
I happened to be at Staples in Plymouth having some copies of my poems recorded and printed. And a young man was there, and he said to me, I want to buy, who wrote that? I said, I did. He said, I want to buy it. I said, it's not for sale. He said, but I want it. I'm looking at this physical, football-looking man, looking up at him, and I said, I just told you, it's not for sale. And my battle cry was always, in the rough days, little rivers sinks big ships. So I said, no, it's not for sale. So he reached in his pocket, he took out a roll that would choke a horse, and he said, you name it, I want that poem. I said, why do you want that particular poem? He said, my dad was a merchant mariner, World War II, on the Merrimack's run. And he said, I wanted to give it to him as a present. I said, I would not charge you for it, but I will send it to your dad. He said his dad lived down Cape Cod, and he lived in Manomet, in Plymouth. I sent off the poem, and about a week later I get a call, Mr. Conneely, we got the poem in the mail. Would you come to Mass Maritime Academy the first Sunday of the month and be there by 1 o'clock? I said, yes, I will. I was familiar with the academy because I thought that one day my son would become a member there and graduate from there. But that didn't come about, and it kind of broke my heart. I go to Mass Maritime. I get there 1:45, and guess what? I forgot who I was to see. I said, oh my God, if I go back to Plymouth, I won't be in time to go in there, the Harrington building. So I seen people going in, some in uniform, some without, and I go in, and there's 2 or 3 people at desks. And the one in the middle looked up, he said, are you Patrick? I said, yes, I am. He said, take a seat, the meeting is about to start. And I'm saying to myself, what is this Irishman doing here? They had pledged the allegiance to the flag, had a moment of silence for the departed, and then they said, would our honored guests arise and identify yourself? And I'm looking around. And then I looked towards the podium, and I looked towards the desk. And the man at the desk, who was the secretary, was, I think his name was Dunford. Yes, it was. And he's going like this. And then I realized I was the one to go to the podium. I go to the podium and I'm saying to myself, what am I doing here? And the next thing I know is I introduced myself as Patrick Conneely, formerly of the Irish Merchant Marine, the British Merchant Marine, and the American Merchant Marine. I said, I'll explain the British part later. And they started to laugh, and it kind of broke the ice for me. I was invited to join that chapter, and I was associated with that chapter till the time that it became defunct. Now, every month I had a poem for the Merchant Marine. I recited it, we raffled it off. I wouldn't take the money for it. It went back into the Merchant Marine Fund. And the reason really I wrote that poem was the 4th of July in Plymouth Harbor, the Philharmonic Orchestra played tunes for the armed forces, the Coast Guard, Navy, all of the armed forces, but sadly the Merchant Marine was never mentioned. And it bothered me. 3 o'clock that morning, I was thinking about it, and I said, you know what? I'm going to write a poem. And that's how that poem came around, and I called it The Sailor's Grave. Jack.
Pat, would you do that poem for us, please?
Thank you. You got to bear with me today. The hip is not doing that good. And this, Jack, is what I wrote for the courageous men of the Merchant Marine. There are no flowers on a sailor's grave, for he sleeps beneath the restless wave. Far from the land, 1,000 fathoms deep, his life now over, no watch to keep. His sailor's grave is far from the family he loves so well. Come winter winds and winter gales, no one survived to tell the tales. That is why there are no flowers on an ocean swell, for the sea does not give up its secrets, and the sea will never tell. We know.
You know, poetry is very difficult in many, many respects. We all know that. There are many, many poems written, but unfortunately, and I say this, very, very few poems have been written about the sea and the ships that sailed on those seas. Pat has taken upon himself to comprise a number of very beautiful poems, book form, as you see, of stories behind the stories of the United States Merchant Marine. Patrick is well known for the poetry that he has written. He's spoke many times in many areas, and we're always proud to have Pat with us because this book that he has put together will be on sale in a matter of time. To take advantage of this book and some of the most beautiful poems that you could read. In fact, this book is a memory to many others, men that sailed the Merchant Marine, women that have had their sons, their fathers in the Merchant Marine. But overall, it is not just specifically one area. Pat has covered a number of areas within this book, as you see displayed. And so now I'm going to turn this back over to Pat relative to stories that brought him to put these in book form. Pat, how did it all start?
Well, I think it started, my introduction to Mass Maritime Academy.
Yeah,
started with the Sailor's Grave.
Right.
And I remember I said to my wife, Evelyn, I'm going up there and talk to Maestro, and I'm going to ask him, why is not the Merchant Marine have a song or mentioned? She said, you can't do that. All these people here, it's the 4th of July. So I went up, and I said to Maestro, did you ever hear of the Merchant Marine? He said, what did they do? I said, they lost more men than the combined forces of these United States and never got the recognition. They could never draw on combat duty, even though they were on the first hit list for the U-boats and the wolf packs. And he said, well, they don't even have a song. Well, I said, maybe we would start with Roger Whitacre's The Last Farewell. So he wrote it in the book, but I never heard it played. And this was the way I came to Mass Maritime.
As I had asked, well, the number of poems, and we've had the pleasure of having you here, as you've read some of these poems, what enticed you to put this all together in book form, which is beautifully done?
Well, I always felt so badly for the American Merchant Marine, and I wanted to do something about it. And thinking about it, it was driving me crazy, actually, that I got to do something in book form, that they should not be forgotten. And it started me on the road for the Merchant Marine to be honored. And they were people that became what became known as the greatest generation, and a great part of it. And this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to repay the United States for taking me in. For years, I had problems in my own country with the British. They dumped my Merchant Marine license, which was issued by the Irish Ministry of Transport in the north of Ireland. I became disillusioned because I thought after we got part of our freedom in the south that we'd be friends now. But the north of Ireland was a whole different ballgame. And thanks to a Scottish skipper, he helped me get back on my ship. And I got a new Merchant Marine license, and it was issued by the Board of Trade in England, and they put me down as British. I was born under the Irish flag, not the British flag, and I resented that. And finally, I met a beautiful Irish girl, and her people were shipwrecked on Nantucket Shoals years ago in the 1840s, 47. And they married into Quakers on the island of Nantucket, who were in the whaling business. And their store and fish shop is still there today. It's on Steamboat Wharf in Nantucket. I immigrated. First year, I didn't like ashore. I went back to the Irish Merchant Marine, and I was torn between my love for my wife, Winnie, and the sea. And the sea almost won out. Actually, it didn't really give up because I'm still associated with the sea.
You know, actually, when you stop and think, you have a lot of stories to tell. But the talent of poetry. Pat at one particular time was telling me about you found out exactly who you were in poetry. Mind telling us about that?
Yes, I was clean. We went to England to a wedding, and when we came back, we had a horrendous trip between delays in planes, etc. We finally got to our home in Plymouth. We were so glad to see that driveway. But when we opened the door, we needed sea boots. While we were in England for 3 weeks, we had a flood, and it was in the summertime. And all of the deck or floor, if you will, 4 feet up around the walls had to be replaced. It was July 28th. We moved into Comfort Inn in Plymouth. We were just in bed when all the alarms went off. We had to go out into the yard. And I said, I'm not putting up with this. We're going to move on our trawler yacht. So we moved on the trawler yacht on the 29th. And we didn't get back in our home again until October. But everything was packed in boxes. Now I'm unpacking stuff. And I come across a tube. And I thought that tube had a chart in it for navigation. And when I opened it out, it was my coat of arms. And on the bottom of the coat of arms, which we might take a shot off later, it said Conneely, son of the poet. And I said, oh my God, that's where I get that from.
You know, there has been, when Pat has read his poetry here at Medfield TV, and it was broadcast, I've had a number of people ask the beauty of poetry, and it is beautiful. It is self-expression, not from the mind to write, but from the heart. We know that some of the finest poets have written from the heart. And then when I came across with Pat and talked, his coat of arms, and this goes back a number of years as a poet. That is a talent that word becomes inadequate to express, but there is a lot to it. And so each and every page in this book is some of the most beautiful poetry that you can read.
Thank you, Jack.
I've had friends of mine say, well, I'm going to distribute it. I want to tell my family about it. Poetry is something in which you can express your feelings, but from your heart. And as I had said to Pat earlier, this book that is viewed soon will be for sale, and I advise you after to look and read it, because this poetry is beautiful. Pat, what precised you in the idea is to put these beautiful poems in book form?
Years ago, as a painting contractor, I was given receipts to a Harvard University professor that I was working on his home. And handing him the receipts, there was a poem mixed up with the receipts that I had written a week before that. He happened to pick it up. He said, "What is this?" He said, "Let me look at this." And he read it. He said, "What do you do with stuff like this?" I said, "I put it in a drawer and I read it or write another one." "Oh, no, Patrick. This should be shared with the public." He said, "Not in a drawer." He said, "I want you to continue writing." And he said, "Never give it up." And he kind of put a spark in me that maybe, just maybe, I might write something that would bring comfort and happiness to humanity.
And you have. You know, when you put all of this in a small book form, the beginning of Pat as a young man in Ireland as a Sea Scout, the careers of the Merchant Marine, both with the Irish Merchant Marine, the English Merchant Marine, and the American Merchant Marine, and the areas in which you covered slowly diversified. But that talent of a poet is never forgotten. And so consequently, these things that you have put down are long-lasting. I know that I have read some of them, and they are beautiful.
Thank you.
But that's talent from the heart. That is poetry. I know you have one more there that I'd like to have you read, because it's a beauty.
Thank you, Jack. Our good friend and advocate for the Merchant Marine, Roger Hardy, when I first met him and I used to read my poetry, he used to say, "I love your brogue." And I'd say, "I don't have a brogue. I got an Irish accent." And he'd laugh. And he said, "An Irish accent?" I says, "Yes." And I said, that came from Queen Elizabeth, that said Irishmen spoke like they had a brogue in their mouth. A brogue is a walking boot in Ireland. So it became a brogue for an Irishman. And I looked it up in the English dictionary, and I emphasized English. And it said brogue, organic impediment in the tongue, dialective. And the hair went up on the back of my neck. I said, even our language, they will not leave us alone. And from now on, this Irishman has got an Irish accent. And that's how that came about. And that day I recited a poem that I wrote. I was on the Irish trawlers at 10 years old, and the U-boats were very active. And to this day, I wonder why my dad ever let me go to sea. But most of our young men went in the British forces, and women, and we had to take up the slack. If you came from a farming family, you worked the land in the summer months, and sometimes into the winter. If you came from a mariner's or seaman's home, you went on the trawlers. And we had many, many lucky escapes at that. So I got thinking about it, and I wrote an old merchant mariner's lament, which I am now.
Did you read that for us?
And this is what I wrote, Jack. I, to sail once more in peace on God's majestic ocean. No U-boats now to take their terrible toll. When the wolf packs attacked almost nightly on their North Atlantic winter war patrol. Recalling once more those long dark nights and the heaving seas that brought me safely to thee, when we were so young and so much in love, with every flowing emotion, flowing like the master's windswept ocean. I, just to watch once more the wheeling gulls, the diving gannets at the dawning of another day, drinking in God's salty air, sailing close-hauled on the master's rolling sea, keeping a weather eye open day by day, plotting a course to a safe harbor, taking time to pray. From dead ahead, the distant guiding harbor light beckons once more as we sail close-hauled off New England's rock-bound shore, just to count once more 1,000,000 stars across the heaven's night sky on watch, a lone mariner stargazing on the 12 to 4. I, to feel once more a gentle sea breeze caress my aging, weathered face. Spindrift flying, windsong in the rigging, head seas shipping aboard, sea smoke passing astern without a trace. Oh yes, like the sands of time, my old memories are fading away, like the disappearing dreams of yesterday, sweet dreams of old Ireland and dear old Galway Bay. I to watch once more a sunset at sea off old Cape Cod, or a sunset falling like a golden coin, slowly falling, falling, falling from the hand of God.
If you stop for just a few moments after Pat had just got through reading that lament, think about it. Each one of these poems in this book, to a lot of you, will bring back a lot of memories. To a gentleman that's at one time sat and wrote more than just a memory, a heart. And so I say, as I had said at the beginning of the program with Pat, this book will offer you some of the most beautiful poems to let you reminisce as time goes by. Pat, I want to thank you very much for your time here. As I had said earlier, this book that we are showing will be for sale at not an expensive price in bookstores. And so consequently, as you read through it, it is also your lament. Pat, thank you once again.
Thank you for having me, Jack. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. And so in parting, remember what is in that book is many, many areas where a sailor's prayer, a lament, and others await you. This is Jack Peterson wishing you and yours the very best. Good night.